So there's a couple of real big problems in physics that nobody knows how to solve. One of them is, why should particles be probability distributions? That's going back to the double slit experiment. And nobody knows. Now they say, well, we just assume that they are, and then we can calculate lots of things that turn out to be true when we do the experiments. But it just starts from that assumption. But we have no idea why they ought to be probability distributions. Well, this theory tells you why they ought to be probability. We live in a probabilistic statistical reality. It's just consciousness. This is a model. We're in a big simulation. We're in a computer game, you see.
The Truman Show.
Yeah. So we're in this big, elaborate multiplayer computer game, interacting as consciousness with the data stream, so that we can evolve, grow toward love. One of the feedback systems in this computer game is that you can modify the probable future. See, we look at the future in terms of probability. Because this system now has created this world for us to live in, then it also computes what's likely to be next, what's probable to be next. And then given that that's true, what's probably next after that? And given that that's true, what's probably next after that? Well, you can only go so far because the errors are building as you go out. But you can go pretty far because most of us are pretty predictable, if you figure that the database is everything we've ever done, thought, imagined, every emotion, every feeling, that's all in the database of the character. So what's going to happen in the next tiny second is not that hard to guess. So this can go out for a pretty long way. So you have this future probable database, which then, as time clicks on, it becomes the present. Free will just exists here in the present. We act, we make choices, and by these choices we either evolve or de-evolve. If the choice is out of caring, then we evolve some. If the choice isn't, we de-evolve some. We have free will. We can go either way we want. Our intent is the motivator, is the action. That's what drives the action, is our intent, which is a representation of who and what we are at the core level, at the being level, as I call it, as opposed to the intellectual level, which is what we think we are or hope we are. So here we are. We use our intent, and we can modify the probable future. We can change the probabilities around of what's likely to happen next with our intent. Now that then tells you why the placebo effect works. Why is it that you can give somebody a sugar pill and tell them this is a great new medicine? It's going to make your liver stop quivering, and you take that pill, and sure enough, about 35–40% of the people, their liver will get better because they took that pill. And in the control group where they didn't get that sugar pill, they don't get better. You see, so it's real medicine because now you have a positive attitude toward that outcome. Well, you're putting energy into modifying the probability that you get better as opposed to worse. You see, it's your intent. How do you heal somebody with your mind? It's your intent that does it. You see, how does it work that some of the experiments that are done at Princeton, it's Pear Labs, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research. That's it. They use their mind to affect matter. One of the ways, it's a thing on YouTube, they have this little robot, and the robot is programmed to move in random directions. So they turn it on, sit it in the middle of a table, and it just kind of dithers around in the middle of the table because it's random directions, which means it's just as likely to go in any direction as any other. So it never leaves really a very tight circle there in the middle. But then they have a graduate student or somebody use their mind to bias that robot so that it doesn't stay random. And that little robot will just dither and work and drop off the edge of the table. They do this on a round table. And of course they have no idea how that works or why it works, and they do a lot of other, that's just one experiment. They have lots of experiments they do there. And the way it works, of course, is that you can modify the probability of what happens next. You're actually putting a little bias into those random numbers, and you can move them out. You have Bill Tiller. He has a beaker of tap water, and he uses his mind to increase or decrease the pH. How does he do that? I don't think Bill has any idea how he actually accomplishes that. He just knows that it can be done. The way he does that is that the pH of the water is not really a, should I say, a set thing. the pH of the water is changing. At the minute level, you have OH minus and H plus ions that are combining, recombining molecules of water that fall apart and so on. So the pH is, if you looked at the pH at the fifth decimal place over, you'd see the pH is, it's a zigzaggy, jagged curve. It's changing all the time. Within that uncertainty, you can use your intent to modify it one way or the other. So you can make it go up just a hair, just within the uncertainty. There's a thing called the psi uncertainty principle. You can only modify it within the uncertainty that's natural to the system. So you can modify it a little bit, so now the pH is a little higher. Then later you can modify it a little bit so the pH is higher, and then so the pH is higher. And all these little, plus-ups of the pH eventually can run it up, very high, or down very low. So it's just using your intent to modify what is most likely to happen. Professor Emoto, right? He freezes things, and when he freezes the crystals, they're pretty crystals or ugly crystals, depending on what he's thinking at the time. And the erroneous conclusion is jumped to that the water cares, that the water is, likes Bach and detests acid rock. Because when he plays acid rock, he gets all these nasty, ugly crystals, and when he plays Beethoven or Bach or something, all these pretty little crystals, you see. So water likes classical music. Well, water doesn't like classical music. Water's just water. Well, the way water freezes, the way it crystallizes, has a lot of uncertainty. If you have uncertainty in the system, then you can modify that system with your intent. So it's because Professor Emoto likes Bach and detests acid rock. That's why the crystals are like that. It's his intent. It's what he likes that makes the difference. If you did this all in a machine context without anybody knowing about it, what do you call it, double, triple blind, nobody even knows the experiment's going on. But sometime a robot will take water and pour it and freeze it and do this sort of stuff, and it's, you don't know. It's going to happen sometime during the year, that sort of thing where you don't have any intent focused on it. Then you just get frozen water crystals. It really wouldn't make any difference. But as long as you have an intent, a mind focused on it, then you can change it. You can influence it. All right, how does, how do things like horoscopes, astrology work? How about in the more native peoples throw chicken bones on the ground and interpret the future from them, or tea leaves, or any of the other things, the tarot cards? How do they work? Well, the way they work, the only active ingredient is conscious intent. That's the only active ingredient. It's not that the chicken bones. It's not that the chicken bones are magic chicken bones that somehow array themselves to tell the future. How the chicken bones fall is just pretty random. There's a lot of uncertainty in how they fall. Someone with an intent who is focused on getting information out of that future probable database, you see, it's all just hanging out there. That's where precognitive dreams come from. There's a future probable database. So anyone who's focused to that, then the uncertainty in those chicken bones can help them array themselves in a way that gives them the information. So now the chicken bones just become an output format of the larger conscious system. You see, just like dropping the sticks in the I Ching thing. You drop the sticks. How those sticks happen to fall, there's a lot of uncertainty in it. They're just dropped. Okay? Now they can be arranged. They can be modified by the system within the uncertainty. See, all these things are very uncertain things that then you let gel. And that gives the system or the individual who's using it an ability to have an effect, or for the system to use that as an output format, if you will, as a way of communicating with you because of the uncertainty in it. So we have all these things, lots of experiments that have been done that, they're good, solid experiments. The scientific protocols are good, but that people have no idea. The reverse, you've probably heard of reverse causality. Started with a bunch of patients in a hospital. And the patients, these are records. The patient records are like a decade, 2 decades old. And rabbis sit around and they pray for them, and healers, try to make their health better. And sure enough, the ones of the group that they pray for and try to make healthier, they all have shorter hospital stays on the average than the ones that were the control group. Well, how is that? These are old records, you know, and they say that's reverse causality. They've actually caused something, you know, to change in the past. They're not changing anything in the past. They're taking records that nobody has analyzed. Where the means are for mean hospital stay out of those groups of records, still in the future. You see, nobody's ever analyzed them. So they can modify what they say. The problem is people, because they believe in a objective causality, believe that whatever the records say is what must have happened. There's not that connection. Those patients did whatever they did. They're out of the hospital. You're not changing anything. All you're doing is modifying what the records say. And you can do that because there's uncertainty as to what they say, you see, because nobody studied them yet. And when they take a group, when they gave these people patients that they had then first looked at the data and found out exactly what is the average hospital stay of this group of patients, and then let the rabbis and the healers try to affect it, they can't affect it because that information's already in this reality. No uncertainty anymore, can't be affected. You see, same way explains the double slit experiment. Physicists still don't get it, if you will, about how the double slit experiment works. The double slit experiment is a basic physics experiment. It was done in the early 1920s. You know, early to mid 1920s is when most of this research was done, and what it showed was that reality is probabilistic and statistical. And it did that by doing something that was in violation of objective causality, okay, with this double slit experiment. It's kind of hard to describe double slit experiment without a little graph and something, and so the people actually listening would get it. It would be hard to do. But it demonstrated that reality is really made up of probability distributions. Particles are probability distributions, not little hard things. But when you measure them, like measure which slit they go through, you get a particle. And they made a couple of wrong conclusions. One, they said, well, it's the measurement that turns the probability distribution into particle. So measurement collapses the wave function, is what the physicists at the time would say. And that's really not true. And another thing they said, well, it takes a consciousness to be aware of making a measurement. Consciousness collapses the wave function. That's really not true either. What's true is it's information. Once you measure that you have a particle at a particular slit and that information is available in this reality, then it has to stay in this reality. So you get a particle. So it's the matter of getting the information, having it in this reality. Same with the hospital patients. Once they look at the statistics of what the average stay was, now it can't be affected. The information's in this reality. In order to have it in this reality twice and have it different each time, you see, it gives us a funhouse reality. You know, you can't do that. That's a violation. But as long as we don't know, there's uncertainty, then it could go this way or that way or different ways based upon the uncertainty. So it's just that the information is there. It's an information-based, probabilistic, statistical reality. So we can explain the double slit experiment. We can explain why the speed of light is a constant. Okay, we can explain those things just, you know, with the same science, if you will, that explains the placebo effect. You know, the paranormal becomes just normal. It's not really paranormal, you know, it's just normal. It's the way reality works. We also find we can derive theology. You know, what's the basic tenets in theology? Is there something bigger than us? And if so, how and what and who is it and how do we relate to it? Right? That's really the fundamental basis of theology. This explains all of that. What is our purpose? It explains that. So we call it a theory of everything. I call it a theory of everything, a big picture theory, you know, a big toe. Of course, that's fun, you know, I have this odd sense of humor. So we call it a big toe as opposed to the little toe that Einstein was working on, because it solves Einstein's little toe. It does solve the problem of quantum mechanics and relativity and explains them all. Plus all this other research has been done in Pear Labs and other places all over. And as well, it tells you about, you know, how the tarot cards work, how the chicken bones work, how the astrology works. You know, astrology also has a lot of uncertainty in it. It's a very complex system. You see, you have all these various heavenly bodies and just how they move in relationship to each other, and the moons do this and the planets do that. So you got all this complexity. Well, all that complexity just makes a lot of uncertainty. There's lots of ways you can interpret it. You see, and we know that because if it was just the heavenly bodies and the positions they were in, and there wasn't a lot of uncertainty in how you interpret it, the very, very best astrologers would be computers. Because if it was just the stuff, you see, if it was just where are these heavenly bodies and here's how you interpret it, you know, this is a closed science, right? We know the fact, we just derive the answers by doing the charts. Then a computer would be much better because a computer can do all those trajectories and everything to 64 decimal places, you see, and it can do it in seconds. People can't do that. So the computers would be so much better than any other astrologer ever. They would be more accurate, but it's not like that. Computers aren't more accurate. Computers do kind of rough things, but who's really good at astrology? People with an intent to gather information from the future probable database or from a past database. You can gather information wherever you want. So it's the astrologer. Now, I bet if you take an astrologer and say, well, do a reading for me, but while you're doing this reading, I'm going to march around you in a circle, clapping cymbals and banging a drum, talking to you and tapping you on the shoulder. Now, give us a good reading here, you know, from your astrology. And they'd say, leave me alone. I can't do it in that environment. Why? Because they have to connect with their consciousness to these databases, the probable future, if they're looking for things in the future, or the past, if they're looking there. They have to make that connection. They have to be in touch. So it takes a person, a gifted person, if you will, to do a really good and accurate horoscope. The stars and the planets are like the chicken bones. They're a system that provides uncertainty within which a person can interpret. They provide an output format with which the system can provide information that you can interpret. Tarot cards are the same way. So it explains all of those things, you see, and how they work. So that's why it's a big toe. You started the question, what is a big toe and why do you call it a big toe? So it's been a long talk, but that's a very short version. A longer version would be the 3 books, but that's like 900 pages. And you can go to YouTube and get a pretty decent version, but that's hours worth too. This is going to be quicker than that. So it's not a lot of detail, but all of this is derived in to right brain people, nauseating logical detail, and to left brain people, it's wow, finally something that I can understand, you know. So it's all there in the books and the videos. But that's the point. So we've basically defined theology. We've solved the basic physics problems. We understand why we're here. We understand all these experiments that seem to violate all these paranormal things that, you know, where you get paranormal data. We're all netted. All of us pieces of consciousness, we're all one. It's just one consciousness system. You've probably heard that somewhere. We're all one, right? That's true. We're all pieces of this consciousness system. We're all netted together. So we can communicate. We share information. When you see an aura, okay, I've seen auras, you know, for 40 years. You know, when you see an aura, all you're doing is getting data from the database. If you want to know what my health energy looks like, basically your intent goes and gets that data. This is a data system. This is a big digital consciousness system. It goes and gets that data. And you can get that data any way you want, but because a picture's worth 1,000 words, most of us want it in a picture. And because we associate it with that body, then we see the aura around that body. But we don't need to see the body. You can look at somebody's aura from a photograph or from nothing, just in your mind. You can work with that aura. You don't actually need a body. The aura isn't attached to the body. It's just data that we associate with the body. And it's the same with the rest of these things. It's all information that we access. We access it because we are consciousness. We're not a physical body believing that we have a consciousness created by a brain. That's not it at all. We are consciousness, and we are interpreting these bodies from a data stream. So it just then kind of solves everything and answers all the big questions.